All right. So go ahead and get started. I took, let's see, I took Jeff's original design and I tried to codify it a little bit in a dummy JSON syntax, just to kind of get started anyway. Let me increase my font size here, and then I'll share my screen. Okay. All right. Folks see my screen? All right. So I basically just, again, I took a typical CycloneDX bomb from here on up, is your typical Cyclone stuff that already exists. And I tried to codify the attestation stuff that Jeff Williams was marking up. And this is kind of what he had envisioned anyway. So this is a group or an array of attestations, and each attestation consists of an assessor, which would have been either a self-assessment, could have been the purchaser of a product or service, or if it was an independent assessment, and then what organization actually performed it. So like in the case of a SOC 2, for example, it's an independent assessor. But in the case of, maybe self-assessment to SSDF, for example, well, then it would be self. Should I stop there and we can talk about this, or should I keep on going?
Can I ask a question around just kind of general goals here? Is the goal to specifically provide an attestation framework for like external attestations and certifications, at which point there would be a lot of probably evidence that would need to be supplied? Or is this something more in line with like the in toto attestation framework, where you're trying to provide an ability to show this particular chunk of code has gone through this process, and here's the cryptographic attestation that occurred?
Yeah, these are non-verifiable. So this is going to be a lot of independent type of attestations. So basically from a design perspective, the complete opposite of in toto.
Got it. Cool.
Whether or not in toto can do it is another story. But yeah, we're looking for, like in the case of SOC 2, right? That's an accounting firm that performs the audit, right? So that's the kind of things that we're looking for. Self-assessments, where you are going to have a lot of evidence attached or referenced to support your claims in adherence to the requirements of a standard, right?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. So is there I guess a question to the group, is there, I mean, this is kind of what Jeff had put in there. He's not here today, but I don't know. I mean, I think he's thinking of this as kind of an enum, but I don't know if this is complete or not, or if it should be something else.
So I tend to talk a lot, so please feel free to tell me to be quiet, should you want. But one of the things about in Toto that makes it very flexible is the fact that you can kind of create your own types. And I would recommend maybe considering something like that here, where we created a couple of types that would make sense for us currently, but implicitly make this an extendable object, where we could then custom define further types and further allow people to define their own types. That really enables a lot of downstream flexibility.
That's, I think, roughly what I was gonna wipe up with in the context of like this makes a fair amount of sense, and I see that this could very easily be an in-toto attestation predicate type, right? Each of these, like each object in the attestations list in the field here could become one instance of a predicate type, and we could emit it as an in-toto attestation. And I think that kind of aligns with what coincidentally several other people seem to be looking at as well. There's some work being done by the folks at Tidelift called DOCOS, that they're targeting standards like the SSDF and things like that, and they're also very interested in they put out some information on the kind of data they want to collect in their metadata, and on their roadmap they want to now move that over to it becoming a predicate type in the in-toto attestation framework. So I think there's like we could all kind of we don't have to, I think, reinvent the attestation framework, but focus on the specifics of the predicate that contains the information you want to communicate.
This right here is just basically the existing CycloneDX organization stuff, so that's kind of already baked in. I don't know if we need any changes there. We get into like the meat of the actual requirement, though. So again, Jeff had this object basically called the requirement, and the requirement had a standard and an identifier along with text. That's kind of what he had envisioned, and I actually copied this directly from his example. But in the case of things like SSDF, for example, which SSDF isn't its own thing, it's actually just a meta framework. It's a collection of other things. So if you adopt, the first behavior in SSDF, that first identifier in SSDF, well, it's actually going to consist of about a dozen other things, and everything from BSIM to other requirements. So this is kind of a way to say that this identifier, when if you meet it, you're also doing these other things. And then those other things could be, again, standards, identifiers, and text, right? So it might be, for example, you might be BSIM, whatever, right?
I think it'd be cool, like, to explore this as a representation of, a single claim in one of these frameworks, like one of these standardization frameworks, and then we could plug it into, like, we'd have a field in the predicate type which essentially just points out to all of these individual instances of that predicate, right? I think we're almost back to talking about it in terms of a series of claims and so on. So I think it really makes sense to break it down to like the fundamental building block of these are the 3 or 4 things that we need to identify which standard we're talking about, which requirement we're talking about, and this parent one contains this one, and we're able to map all of those out of the context of in the broader perspective when we're applying policies and things like that.
Yeah, I worked on a mapping initiative at one point, trying to map across all of these, and they're very different. So I almost would suggest, like, could we flip this around and say, hey, this is the objective, these are where it maps in the standards. right? Because each standard will have certain things for password requirements, for example, just pulling a random example out, right? So the thing is, you want secure passwords. Here's where it is in the other standards, right? Here's the places where this maps in. But I don't know if we want to take that level of mapping on here either. So just throwing it out there, it's a little bit, maybe this isn't the right way to do it, to try to nest it like this.
And some standards are going to be like incompatible with one another, right? You take like NIST 800, what is it, 63B or whatever it is just incompatible with PCI DSS. You can't have both. Yeah, hands up. I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now? No.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Finally, technology works once in a while. Instead of us trying to map standards in this project, we could use opencre.org and link to CREs. For those who don't know, full disclosure, I am one of the leaders. But for those who don't know, a long while ago, we started trying to create exactly this mapping between different sections and subsections of different standards. And we put them all in a graph database, and that became opencre.org. What if we encourage users, and feel free to shout at me, but what if we encourage users to use a meta linking standard like opencre.org and link to CRE? Then it's kind of trivial, like machine readable way, you can find if standards are compatible to each other, or if there are other links to other resources that you might miss.
Right. No, that's great. How much data does this OpenCRE actually have? You got ASVS, right?
Mm-hmm.
What else is in there?
Off the top of my head, ISO, ASVS, NIST, NIST, CSA, cloud controlled mappings, CWE, ISO, and a couple of others. Among everything from OWASP, like top 10s, proactive controls. The idea is to eventually have everything.
Right.
But yeah, that's the idea.
So what would that look like in terms of like if we were to include OpenCRE, what would that actually look like?
So I would say instead, or on top of saying I link to, say, PCI paragraph 6, subparagraph 5, section A, you could say I link to PCI XYZ, but also here's a link to opencre.org, or here's a CRE where I also link to. And then people who wanted to find this sort of gap analysis, or find if there is any links between PCI and this other standard they're interested in, can easily and quickly find it with maybe even one link or one API call.
Mm-hmm.
So it would just be
a single URI then, just a single link to OpenCRE.
Yeah, okay. It could be something opencre.org/CRE/VID, 6 digits, right. And that's it.
Okay. Yeah, mappings are fun.
The other option is we could make it an array here and say something like standards, or the specific subsections of that. What was it? There was InSpec, I think, was something that supported that. It was the Chef initiative to try to do policy as code, where they basically set it so that you could show all of the standards that you were linking to in their specific areas there. And that way you could use, just a web link, or you could use the OpenCRE or whatever you want at that point. And that way we're not closely coupling it to one particular solution, but we could, encourage the use of a solution by saying, hey, our examples include links out to this because this then makes it easier for these other reasons.
Right. But you were saying something about the fact of making the standard an array.
It was just an idea, is that you could theoretically say, instead of standards, and say, hey, this particular requirement meets these standards in these sections. That probably wouldn't work for this model. But going back to if we had flipped it the other way, where you say this is the goal and it's in these sections of the standards, you could have then the standard with the section that it is underneath that. So you could kind of flip the model upside down if you led with, this is the thing we're trying to accomplish. But to the other points that were raised earlier, then you start getting into the mapping conversation, which I agree, I don't think we would want to be in that world. It's painful.
No, it is. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So in this particular case, OpenCRE would just be a URI. Discussion about tacos. Oh, yeah. I saw a blog post on that earlier. It was a blog post. I'll have to read that later. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would rather not do the upside down thing, because again, it gets into the mapping exercises, which means that you need to bring in lawyers because words have specific meanings. And yeah.
Sorry, just to clarify, when you say you don't want to do the mapping version, what you'd then be targeting is with one document or one document that may link out to other documents, you have everything that talks that contains requirements that correspond to one standard, right? And
well,
in this way,
no,
you'll
be able to one document that would be that would contain all your attestations for all of the standards that you are attesting to. If you're attesting to multiples, well, it's going to contain multiples. So if I want to attest to SOC 2 and ISO 27001, yeah, I can do that with one document.
I see.
The next thing he had was a claim object. Now, he had Jeff, meaning he had a conformance thing as a Boolean. So he had this as a true false thing. But in reality, partial conformance is actually really important. So I personally made that a decimal. Like, for example, are my developers required to get yearly security training? Maybe that is the requirements. And I might claim that, well, mostly 80% of my developers are actually doing this today. And the other 20% might be required to do it next year. So what are your thoughts on having this as a decimal or something else?
I think it's hard to reason about that without, context about each specific policy we could apply to that claim. Like, you gave a good example about, well, maybe my policies are required 80% of your developers to get that training, and so decimal makes sense. But I don't know. I think it comes down to each type of claim.
And what's the use case for claim as a separate entity? If we're trying to say that we're mapping to a standard, for example, and we're trying to say that our developers are trained in security, right? That's part of the program. Shouldn't that be tied to the standard and the specific piece of the standard rather than being a separate claim? Because we're talking about basically doubling and not being dry, if that's the case, which may be appropriate in this instance, but I'm just curious what the goal of the claim is as a separate entity.
Yeah, so basically everything lives under, again, this is Jeff's model. I just kind of codified it. But essentially, this is one attestation. Obviously, the document can have lots and lots of attestations. But in his model, a single attestation could have an assessor, a requirement, claim, evidence supporting that claim, your confidence in your analysis of that evidence to support that claim, and your reasoning why that evidence actually fulfills that claim. So in his mental model, that's what he had all under a single attestation object. Now, whether that's the right model, I don't know. But thoughts on that?
Do we never have more than one claim for the requirement?
Yeah, right
That's a
out of the
question.
bat, I think it should be an array for sure, because the requirements can sometimes be very open-ended, or they like if the idea here is that you've got this standard that you're trying to meet. Sometimes the standards have 3 or 4 things in one section, so you would probably want to assert for multiple claims right out of the gate.
Yep.
And you'd want evidence to be mapped to each claim rather than be its own thing. You'd have like I can foresee a list of evidence objects for each claim. It's going to get pretty convoluted, I think, because you'd want evidence to you could use the same evidence object for different claims as well. So it gets a little interesting there.
Yeah, so we're on line 54. You've got claims as an array. I could almost see that being evidence, right? And then your evidence supports the claim rather than it being something separate entirely.
So you're saying basically, well, first of all, the evidence can actually be used for multiple claims. Yes. I mean, we could, so if this actually had a what Cyclone recalls to a bomb ref, which is an identifier, we could then have a ref. So this piece of evidence is for that particular claim. Or we could do something like this, where this evidence object, here are the multiple claims that it's for. Right.
Yeah. But then why would we have claims at all on 55 there? I think maybe at that point you kind of take it out. I don't understand where the subclaims are coming in.
Oh, again, that was his model.
Okay.
Yeah, he had actually subclaims. He had like subclaims like out here. I personally didn't like that model because he also didn't know like what to. I think he was struggling with subclaims as well because it can go down into infinitum at sometimes. So I simply made the ability for a claim object to have an array of claims optionally. So you can nest as much as you want, but or not at all.
I guess I'm kind of struggling with understanding why we would need subclaims. A claim is a claim. If they're related, maybe we need something to describe the relation rather than because you see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
A claim should be a granular item, right? And if all of the claims roll up to, you know, that you meet the section of a certification or whatever, that's, I think, maybe important to have that mapping somewhere, to have that relationship clearly defined somewhere. Otherwise, I would think that a claim is a claim and it should be granular.
I would think so. I wasn't a fan of subclaims.
I guess what's the use case? You know, like, I always try to look at things from a use case perspective. What are we trying to say when we're saying that we are claiming this, right? It should be a granular thing. So subclaims logically then wouldn't make sense to me. And maybe I'm just not seeing it, but like that's kind of my thought process here.
Right.
So that would be my question is, why do we need this at all? We should have a list of claims, right? And what you did there with linking the evidence to the claim, I think that type of a linking makes a lot of sense. Maybe it relates to this other claim potentially. And then we could define how it relates, or not have that relation at all and instead say, this references this is part of this standard, or this is supporting this standard, right? Or like having some kind of a relationship definition there.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense actually, because then we could have not just subclaims, but we could have other types of relationships as well.
Yeah, and that's something just kind of to think through is what are the relationships, what's the use case here, and what are we trying to enable when we're building this spec out? Is we want people to be able to see, and this is as much a question to the group as anything, but I would think we want to be able to easily see, here's all of the evidence that we've got explicitly, here are the claims that we're asserting to, these are the things that we're saying that we do, here's the evidence that backs them, so that relation's important. Right. And then this evidence and these claims support this standard that we're trying to show that we achieve, right? We're trying to provide real evidence and a real method of conveying that information out. So to me, having those relations is really the important part. And, you know, a claim then would be a very granular piece.
Right. Yeah.
So I get, sorry, this is a slightly different question. Steve, are you going to be posting this, the sample JSON with the scheme somewhere that we could all play with? Or
I will. Yeah. I'm
Okay.
going to check it into. We've got a 5.1 dev branch that I'm going to fork here in just a little bit, and I'm gonna throw it out there. That and I'll actually, you know what? Why don't I do it now, since I don't think I have everybody's contact information. So
Sure.
let me just do that right now and send it out.
Sure. No, the reason I was talking about this was there are a couple of things. I think I mentioned earlier that I could see this fitting in well as a predicate within the auto attestation framework. And that was back when I was thinking of it along the lines of, we're going to have a predicate type for a particular standard with some set notions of these are the requirements, and they each map to one field in the predicate and things like that. But if instead we're going to be working with a series of claims that then map back to one or more requirements, I think that gets a lot more generalizable, and it's closer to things like the sky predicate that we've already kind of defined, but more, artifact specifically. But I could see that the model it has for, like, it what it calls an attribute could map to being a requirement in this context. The evidence, it's got similar things with like evidence, it's got notions of producer as to who's making that claim and all of that stuff. So it's got conditions, evidence, it's got similar notions there, and you have an array of attributes that you'd make all of these claims about. So I'd be curious to take what you have here and try and see how it would plug in there to see if we're a lot closer to completion than, would have been originally thought, perhaps.
And to add on to that, would it be possible to get the original ask documented somewhere, like what the concrete goals are, what we're specifically looking to enable here? Because there may be other ways of thinking about it as well. And in order to like kind of get the creative juices flowing, seeing what the actual requirements are, what the concrete desire was for this would probably be helpful.
Yeah, it all stems back. Well, I mean, there's multiple efforts, but the world has kind of gone SBOM crazy, which is interesting. But regardless of whether you provide an SBOM to the federal government or not is kind of irrelevant. You will have to provide an attestation, however, if you want to sell to the federal government. So the number of attestations consumed or provided and consumed by the feds is going to dwarf the amount of SBOMs that they ever intend to consume. But this is not just applicable to the feds. This is applicable to any organization that has ever had to go through the grueling process of filling out a spreadsheet for ISO 27001 or SOC 2 or whatever, and do that every single year or for every single customer that you have, right? So having a machine readable general purpose way of conveying attestations that can be used by the majority of organizations, including those ones in high assurance environments, is kind of the goal that we were after. I'm gonna put the link. I just did the initial commit.
I think that kind of aligns with a lot of what we're thinking of. I don't want to speak for you, Bart. I know you're also on the call and you're one of the attestation maintainers. In that we wanted to create a generic way to express attestations, right? And that's the internal attestation framework, and the specifics of what claims we're making is where the predicates come in. So I think that it'll be interesting to figure out if we need to redo the attestation or the statement layer, as we call it, as well, or if we just need to focus on the specifics of the claims that we want to make to the federal government, which would be more at the predicate layer. Like, because again, I don't know that there's anything in the outer layers that would necessitate redoing it, essentially.
Right. I just sent the link to the JSON that I'm working on in the chat window.
Cool. Yeah, I'm going to try and see how this would map to what Sky already supports, and maybe put something up on an issue or something. I don't know, where people are going to be discussing these ideas. And if anyone else wants to have a go at it, go wild, I guess. I have the Sky link in the chat. And again, if we're just trying to do if we're trying to define a way of creating a list of claims backed by evidence, I think that we don't maybe have to start all over again.
Yeah, and I like that approach as well, because it lets us focus on what are we trying to enable and what specific goals are we trying to achieve. So I do agree that in toto attestation framework in general could support something like this if we're trying to do generic claims or generic statements, right? We may want to have something like a statement where it's not cryptographically signed, because maybe the end user here is business users and they are going to have a tool that's not going to cryptographically sign this thing. That's valid and something that we could probably take back to the in-toto team and say, hey, maybe we need to think about that part of it. But I think the key is, what are we trying to enable? And then what do we need to do to enable that, right? So if we're here looking at this JSON layer, deep in the weeds, right? This is a big thing that engineers always do. We're deep in the weeds trying to figure this out at the lowest level. And I think we really need to step back and say, what are we trying to enable and achieve? And then let's take that logical thinking process down from the top to say, does this make sense? Does this not make sense?
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
Let's see, going back to, now I have not codified this part, but Jeff basically had each piece of evidence was basically an artifact, and this is kind of his thinking model, I guess. The type of artifact. This makes sense, actually. I don't see any content of, or maybe a URL to the artifact, but not the actual like artifact itself. Doesn't appear to be inlined.
Yeah, I think that's just because the number of artifacts or the number of formats that they might be, it would be way too big to like embed it directly. So a link to it's probably the right call.
Yeah.
The other thing might be, so we've got date of creation, expiration, or, you know, when it needs to be renewed, might be something that we would want to keep track of. A lot of standards, right, require annual pen tests or annual assessments, something like that. I don't know if we'd want that up at the up at that level, but noting when something expired, capturing that somewhere would probably be useful. Maybe that should be in the claim section rather than in the evidence section. Saying, hey, we claim that this, you know, again, using the example you used earlier, we have a developer security training program, right? And it's annual and it expires at such and such date. That piece of information might be useful to capture. Just not sure where it would go, if it would go here in the evidence or in claims or in the standard somewhere, not sure, but.
Yeah, I mean, if we're claiming, you know, annual security training that we're doing it, then maybe the evidence is just a PDF of a report actually showing that, you know, my 1,000 developers have actually completed the training.
Yeah, or maybe it's an applicable date range, like saying this is this claim covers, or this evidence covers this date range, something like that.
Right.
And again, I'm not sure if this is even really, strictly speaking, necessary, but thinking through like the use cases that I would want to be able to say, hey, you know, use this and say, hey, I need to make sure that I do this every year or else it's no longer valid.
Right. No, that's a valid point. Yeah, he was trying to create an enum right here. I think some of these make sense. Actually, all of these make sense, I think. Looks like he was possibly thinking of some other artifact types.
Yeah, my comment on that would be the same as previously. We would probably want to keep that flexible and say, here are the base examples that we provide, and here's how you create your own custom examples.
Right. Got it.
I don't think we'll ever get that enum right. You know what I mean?
No, you're probably right. You are probably right. Well, I know you're right. And, if we come back up to this, to the claim itself, right? The claim could be for like maybe a product that I'm developing, maybe it's for the entire organization, maybe a business unit within the organization. The subject of the claim is probably kind of in the same boat, right? Because we're never going to get that right either.
Yeah, and I hate to beat a dead horse on this one, but again, this is where like that the concept of the predicates over in toto, it maps to this kind of a thing perfectly.
Did I have predicates for all these things already though?
No, but the idea of the predicate, keeping it as something that you can kind of custom define for your use case, that idea is extremely powerful, and it's what enables a lot of extension and enhancement. I think we would want to pull that idea in here one way or another, whether we actually use the Intuitive framework or whether we pull the idea and have it within this framework. That idea is very powerful.
Noted. Yeah, I agree. If we wanted to support that, would we have to rely on Intoto to actually support it, or could we do it outside? Right. Okay.
Yeah, my understanding is I'm by no means an expert on Intoto, but when I was looking at implementing this at a large pharmaceutical, the idea was that you could publish your JSON schemas at a web URI, and then that could just be assumed to be a valid predicate, or you could sign them and have them authoritatively be a valid predicate. So we could publish the schemas out there and say, this is the predicate for product, this is the predicate for organization, this is the predicate for this. So we could absolutely do that. That is part of it. It is extensible by design.
Got it. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. I have no idea what he had this in an example. Does anybody know what that is?
Not off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't either.
Found a link that talks about it, maybe. The plan of action and milestones.
For
shows how further the poem shows how it will address and fix any known weaknesses. So basically you have a vulnerability or something, or there's a weakness in here, your conformance is 0.8 as opposed to true. What is your plan of action to bring that up to 100 is my assumption of what this means. I'll throw this link in here.
Okay.
Not sure, but a quick Google search, that's the indication.
Okay. I will research that. All right. And again, going back to his Jeff's mental model within the attestation, he had a confidence. That confidence had a score and a mitigation strategy.
So this is, how does this relate to anything else? So is this at the level of this is the attestation at a whole, the thing you're attesting to? This is my confidence that that all of my claims are true, that all of my everything is the way that I'm saying it is?
Yep, exactly.
how is this? This seems completely subjective. How would you
Yeah.
define the confidence? Like, I don't know that this conveys anything useful.
I know.
Because if I was trying to sell something to the government, it would always be a 1.
Right, exactly. 1.1. Yeah.
My question would be, what is the purpose of this confidence, and what are we trying to convey with this? So I don't know if you're taking this back to who was it? You said Jeff came up with this originally.
Yeah. Well, again, I've committed it to the repo. I'm going to commit this to the repo. Obviously, it's not going to be valid JSON because of all this artifact stuff that's in there. But yeah, I'm going to commit it back to the repo. I'll let Jeff know that I've done so, that we've kind of talked about it. I can't share the recording, like the URL to the recording, just because my employer restricts it. But I do plan on publishing this out to YouTube. So I'll put the link to the video once it's available on YouTube, and I'll send that out to Jeff as well, so he can kind of catch up.
That'd be great. And again,
yeah.
if the explicit requirements of the ask can somehow get documented, that I think will also help a working group really norm around what we're trying to achieve and how we can get there. And kind of
because I want to, we'll go up to the use case level next time. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let me ask you a different question. Is there anything that you've seen in here that you're just like, no? This is not the right way to do that, or there's a better way to do X?
The only thing I would throw out again is I think that looking at the predicates in toto may be a better way to do this. It may not be. I don't think we know enough now to know. But that would be my observation, is like this whole pattern could be off if that's the right pattern. But we're not going to know that until we like try a little bit and try a couple different permutations, I think.
Yeah.
Nothing here screams to me, at least, that like it's off. I think it's assessor, not accessor, though. S's instead of C's. Oh no, sorry, no, this is somebody who's assessing to that, I think. I need to work on my English.
Yeah, you're asking the wrong person. Okay.
Be a lot easier if the requirements were published with like a valid JSON schema. The standards.
Right. Well, I will.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Hey, my name's Matt Flannery, and I'm from Australia. It's 5 a.m. here. How you guys going? I was wondering how I can get involved with the project, because one, I'm a big fan of Jeff Williams, and this is all pretty cool.
Yeah, well, the fact that you're attending this call at 5 o'clock in the morning is the fact that you're participating.
That's dedication.
That is dedication. I've got a teammate on my team that's from Brisbane, so usually I start syncing up with him in a few hours from now.
Cool. Yeah, I'm helping out the Australian government with some DevSecOps at the moment. So this is right in my my core interest area at the moment. So yeah, if I can help learn more about the project, I know what CycloneDX is. Happy to help any way I can.
Well, that's great. Yeah, so we've I know you joined a little bit late. Matt, was that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't know if you were on at the time, but I posted a link to the JSON schema or the JSON document that we are currently looking at in the chat window.
I must have joined afterwards. Can you reshare it in the chat?
Yeah, it's well, you
I
don't
can't
see
see
the
it.
historical chat. Oh, okay, yeah.
Message
Hey.
of what poem is.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, let me. Where's that link? There it is. Okay, so there's the link to the document. It's
Thanks.
not going to be valid by the time I check it in because we've got some stuff in here, but I'm trying to capture at least all of the comments and whatnot that we're making, not worrying about too much about is it syntactically valid JSON. I could really care less right now. We also have so we've got the issue open on GitHub. And do we have a, yeah, we do have a, it's not used right now. There's not, or it's used, it's out there. But we also have a, I'll get the link to the channel. If you're on the CycloneDX Slack workspace, we also have a channel called Workstream Attestations that you're free to join.
Okay, cool. I'll
Yeah.
I'm not in Slack. I'll join it.
Okay, yeah. There's a growing community. I think there's close to 1,000 people on the OWASP Slack. So
Yeah. I'm in the OWASP Slack. I'm just not in that
oh, I'm sorry, the CycloneDX Slack. Sorry.
Yeah, right, okay. So,
And I'm gonna actually put the invite URL in the chat window as well. So that way people have it if you're not already on it. We've got about 5 minutes left. What was the overall, let me just kind of get a pulse of, do you think this is time well spent? Do you think we're trying to solve a good problem here?
Absolutely think the problem is valid and an important one. How do you convey, what you've done in a clean way is definitely important. And I think the government leading the charge on this, they're one of the biggest consumers on the planet in that. So this is a good approach. The part of the approach, I think, as I said earlier, is I think we're really low level and in the weeds based on one mental model. I think we need to step back and take that top-down approach and say, what are we trying to convey, and then determine what level of granularity, where and how we need to get to. So that would be my only observation on this. I absolutely think the problem is an important one to solve. So
let's start next week. I think I already created a document. It is empty now, however. Where is it? Oh, yeah. So I'm going to share this as well. So we can start iterating on this Google Doc. Everybody should have access to that. And we can start documenting what the use cases are, and that sort of thing. And we can start that. We can start that anytime. Actually, everybody should have the ability to comment on this document. So if you have ideas, whatever, just go ahead and add comments to it. We can start building it out even before next week's meeting. I'll start to brainstorm in between now and then as well. And then, yeah, we can start next week on defining what these high level use cases are and see if what we think we had in terms of a mental model actually fits or doesn't need to change. So, all right, we're at time. I'll go ahead and send out the link to the YouTube video once I get that downloaded and posted. Thanks so much, Derek, and all for your contributions. I truly appreciate it. And have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you too. Right.
All right, cheers. Bye-bye.